Right, now let's have a look at the very first World Cup that was held in 1930 in Uruguay. The Jules Rimet Trophy was named after FIFA's French president. Of the 13 nations taking part, it didn't look as though there would be any teams from Europe who would be playing. But due to Jules Rimet's persuasion, 4 teams from Europe did take part, namely France, Belgium, Yugoslavia and Romania. Now, to create as much diversity of world football as possible, like today, they were put into separate groups. Unlike today, however, the runners-up from each group did not get a second chance. Only the teams who were top of the groups got through to the semi-finals. Now, after a 3-week voyage across the Atlantic, France played their very first game against Mexico, and this resulted on July the 13th in a 4-1 win for France. Now, the game was not without incident, as the French goalkeeper was kicked in the jaw by a Mexican player and he had to go off the field. Now, this 4-1 scoreline seems to me to set the precedent for some really high scoring games in the World Cup. Yeah, I mean, in Group 1 or Group A, Argentina beat Mexico 6-3. What a game that must have been. Not surprisingly, playing like that, Argentina won all their 3 games, thus securing their place in the semi-final. Now, in Pool 2, Yugoslavia beat Bolivia 4-0 and they beat Brazil 2-1 to secure their place. Now, in Pool 3, Uruguay finished top by beating Peru 1-0 and Romania 4-0 in front of a crowd of 80,000 people. Now, I mention this because it's interesting to note that only 300 people watched the group game between Romania and Peru. Isn't that amazing? Now, in the final group, it is interesting to note that the USA won both their 2 games. They were both 3-0 scorelines, so the USA played really well in this first World Cup. But hey, listen to this. In the semi-finals itself, there were identical scorelines. 6-1, both games in the semi-final won 6-1. So wow, what excitement. Argentina beat the USA 6-1 and Uruguay beat Yugoslavia 6-1. Now, in the final itself on July the 30th at the Centenario Stadium in Montevideo, did you know there was a disagreement before the match as to who should supply the match ball? So FIFA suggested that Argentina should supply the ball for the first half and that Uruguay should supply the ball for the second half. Eventually, thus, this first World Cup final was played in front of a crowd of 93,000 people, and despite being 2-1 down, Uruguay rallied to win 4-2. The more I look into World Cup history, the more fascinating it is, and the games from years ago seem just as exciting, or more so in some respects, than the games of nowadays. Now, it's interesting to note in 1930, some of the games were marred by some really bad sportsmanship. Mind you, things haven't changed much, have they? For example, in the 2010 World Cup final between Holland and Spain, no less than 13 players were booked, and the referee Howard Webb sent off the Dutch player Johnny Heitinga. Oh dear.